John Mason woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. The rumble shook the wooden beams of his ranch house, a place that had been his sanctuary for over 20 years. He rolled out of bed, his military training still evident in how quickly he moved despite being in his 60s. The digital clock on his nightstand read 6:47 a.m. He pulled on a pair of jeans and a faded blue button-up shirt before walking to the window. What he saw made his jaw clench. A line of yellow bulldozers, 8 of them, blocked his driveway completely. Men in bright vests walked around them, pointing and talking. John grabbed his hat from the hook by the door and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine from the forest that surrounded his property. His boots crunched on the gravel as he approached the unwelcome visitors. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair stood near the first bulldozer. She wore clothes that seemed too formal for the rural setting, a cream-colored blazer and matching pants that probably cost more than what most locals earned in a month. "Excuse me," John called out, keeping his voice even despite his rising anger. "May I ask why there are bulldozers blocking access to my property?" The woman turned, a smile spreading across her face that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Mr. Mason. I'm Karen Williams, president of the Pinecrest Estates Homeowners Association." She extended a manicured hand, which John did not take. "That doesn't answer my question, Ms. Williams." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, Mr. Mason, these machines are here because your property is in violation of our community guidelines. This driveway will need to be reconfigured to meet our standards." John looked around slowly, taking in the scene. Beyond the bulldozers, he could see new houses being built about a quarter-mile down the road, luxury homes that had started appearing over the past year. "Ms. Williams, I've owned this ranch for 23 years. There was no homeowners association when I built this place, and I certainly never agreed to join one now." A man stepped forward from the group. He wore an expensive golf shirt and khaki pants. His salt and pepper hair was cut short, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. "Greg Patterson, HOA board member," he said with a nod instead of offering his hand. "Mr. Mason, the county has granted us authority over this entire area, including what was previously considered unclaimed wilderness. Your property falls within our jurisdiction now." John felt his pulse quicken but kept his face neutral. "Unclaimed wilderness? This is a 5,000-acre ranch. I have the deeds to prove it." Karen laughed, the sound sharp in the morning air. 5,000 acres. That's quite the tale, Mr. Mason. Our surveys show your actual property line ends just beyond your house. The rest is now under development jurisdiction, which the county has assigned to our association. John turned and looked at his land. The ranch house sat on a gentle slope overlooking valleys and hills that stretched for miles. In the distance, barely visible, were the research barns and storage facilities disguised as agricultural buildings. "I have paperwork dating back decades," John said calmly. "This land has been properly surveyed and registered." Karen pulled out a tablet from her leather bag and swiped through some documents. According to county records, there was a small homestead registered here in the 1970s. Nothing about 5,000 acres. She looked up with a smug expression. "We believe previous owners may have simply used surrounding areas without proper ownership, which was common in these parts. Those days are over now that proper development is coming to the region." John knew arguing would be pointless. The truth about his property wasn't something he could openly discuss. The ranch wasn't just a retirement home, it was the central hub of the Frontier Initiative, a classified government program he had led for 15 years before his supposed retirement. On paper, he had stepped down, but in reality, he remained the project's guardian and administrator. "I see," John said simply. "And these bulldozers are here because?" Greg stepped closer. "Your current driveway violates aesthetic guidelines. It's too rustic and doesn't match the upscale nature of the development. Plus, it cuts through what will soon be community property." John noticed more vehicles arriving. Luxury SUVs with men in business attire stepping out, looking at maps and pointing toward different areas of his land. "I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding," John said. "I'm going to have to ask you to remove these machines from my property while I make some calls." Karen's smile widened. "Your property ends 30 feet back, Mr. Mason. This is now HOA controlled access road. We're being courteous by informing you of the changes, but we don't actually need your permission. A younger man in an expensive suit approached with a folder. Sir, these are the new community guidelines. Your house will need to be repainted to match the approved color scheme within 60 days, and that, he pointed to John's satellite dish disguised as a weather vane, will need to come down immediately. Visible technology is prohibited in front-facing areas. John looked at the gathering crowd. Beyond the bulldozers, he could see curious onlookers from the new development watching the confrontation. Some were filming with their phones. May I ask who authorized these changes? John kept his voice calm, though inside his mind was racing through protocols and contingencies. Karen waved her hand dismissively. It's all been properly approved by the County Planning Commission. My husband serves on the board, so I can assure you everything is in order. Greg added, if you have concerns, you can take them up with our lawyers. Meantime, we start work today. We suggest you move any vehicles you need access to outside the construction zone. John looked at the bulldozers once more, then at the confused faces of his neighbors from the old nearby town who had begun to gather at the commotion. They had lived peacefully alongside his ranch for years, never knowing what actually went on there. I understand, John said finally. Let me make a call first. As he turned to walk back to his house, Greg called after him. Don't bother trying to fight this, old man. Progress is coming whether you like it or not. John didn't respond. He pulled out a secure phone from his pocket, not the smartphone he used for everyday calls, but a specialized device with military-grade encryption. He pressed a single button and waited. When the line connected, he spoke quietly. We have a situation. Code Frontier. He listened to the response, then added, yes, all protocols. And tell Dr. Wright her presence will be required. Time to activate Contingency Plan Delta. As he ended the call, John looked back at the bulldozers and the smug faces of the HOA representatives. They had no idea what they had just stumbled into, or that the unclaimed wilderness they sought to control was actually the testing ground for humanity's future among the stars. The morning sun climbed higher as John Mason sat at his kitchen table waiting. He sipped black coffee from a plain mug while watching the HOA members through his window. They were setting up what looked like a small command post near the bulldozers. Karen Williams was talking on her phone, gesturing with sharp movements of her free hand. 20 years earlier, John would have handled this situation differently. Back then, he was not just a military officer, but the commander of a program so secret that most government officials didn't know it existed. The Frontier Initiative had started as a small research project, after scientists discovered a new way to change atmospheric conditions. What began as a potential solution for climate change quickly became something much bigger. John's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching from the back of his property. He smiled slightly, knowing who had arrived. 3. People entered through the rarely used back door. Dr. Abigail Wright came in first, a tall woman with short gray hair and intelligent eyes behind simple glasses. Despite being in her 50s, she moved with energy that matched her brilliant mind. Behind her was Frank Delgado, a broad-shouldered man with dark skin and a serious expression. His eyes constantly scanned the room. Old habits from his years in special forces. Last through the door was Patricia Holland, a woman in her 40s wearing a business suit that couldn't hide her military posture. Good morning, John, Abigail said, placing her laptop on the table. I see the situation is as serious as you described. John nodded toward the window. 8 bulldozers and a group of people who think they own my land. How did this happen, Patricia? This property was supposed to be protected. Patricia frowned as she took a seat. Someone in the land management office made a huge mistake. They sold the neighboring land without checking the classified property records. The buyers then got county approval for development. Frank remained standing, arms crossed. I've done a quick check of the perimeter. Our security systems are still active and undetected, but some of their survey markers are within 50 yards of access point 3. Too close, John muttered. If they start digging foundation lines there, they could hit the tunnel system. Abigail opened her laptop and turned it so everyone could see the screen. A detailed map showed the true extent of the Frontier Initiative facility, most of it hidden underground. Red dots marked where the new development had encroached on their territory. The problem is bigger than just your driveway, John, Abigail said. The plans they filed with the county show they intend to build a community center right above the main testing chamber. John leaned back in his chair. They can't possibly dig that deep by accident. No, Patricia agreed. But their water and sewage lines might cause problems. And there's another issue. She pulled out an official-looking document. Technically, this land isn't even under Earth jurisdiction anymore. John rubbed his forehead. This was the complex part that few people understood. When the Frontier Initiative was created, they needed legal protection beyond what normal classified status could provide. The solution had been creative: legally designate the territory as an extraterrestrial research domain. So basically, Frank said with a slight smile, these HOA people are trying to build on what is legally not even part of the United States anymore. It's the first human territory officially not part of Earth. That was supposed to protect us from government changes and budget cuts, John said, not from bulldozers and housing developments. Abigail's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard. I've checked the sensors throughout the facility. Everything is still secure, but the vibrations from those bulldozers are being detected by our equipment. If they start actual construction, it could affect sensitive experiments. Outside, Karen Williams was now directing people to place stakes with bright orange ribbons along what she believed was the property line. A line that, according to her, incorrect information ran just 50 feet from John's front porch. What are our options? John asked. Patricia spread several documents on the table. Legally, we have complete authority to remove them. This entire territory falls under special jurisdiction rules. But using that power would draw attention we don't want. Frank moved closer to the window. I could activate the security measures, nothing harmful, just enough to make the area look unstable for construction. Let's save that as a last resort, John said. What about higher authorities? Patricia nodded. I've already contacted Washington. They're scrambling to figure out how this happened, but they've authorized limited disclosure if necessary. Abigail closed her laptop. John, they need to know what they're dealing with. Not everything, but enough to back off. John thought for a moment. The Frontier Initiative had remained secret for decades because of its importance. Under his leadership, the team had developed technologies that could one day save humanity if Earth became uninhabitable. The research facility hidden beneath his modest ranch housed prototypes of atmospheric processors, advanced energy systems, and the beginnings of what would become humanity's first steps toward living on other planets. If we reveal anything, we need to be careful, John finally said. These aren't national security people, they're HOA board members who think they're building luxury homes. A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Frank moved instantly, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Easy, John said, standing up. Let's see what they want. He opened the door to find Greg Patterson standing there, looking impatient. Mr. Mason, our survey team needs access to take measurements of your house exterior. It doesn't meet the aesthetic guidelines for the community. John kept his expression neutral. Mr. Patterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding about who owns this land. I have some people here who can help clear things up. Greg tried to look past John into the house. Unless they're lawyers with the county, I doubt they can change anything. Why don't you bring Ms. Williams and anyone else in charge, John suggested. We should talk. Greg hesitated, then nodded. Fine, 10 minutes. He walked away, already pulling out his phone. John closed the door and turned to his team. Patricia, how much can we tell them? Enough to establish our authority without revealing the purpose of the facility, she answered. Just the legal status and boundaries. Frank checked his watch. I took the liberty of bringing some of our survey equipment. We can give them a proper demonstration of exactly where the real property lines are. Abigail added, and I've prepared the basic holographic display. Nothing too advanced, but enough to show them we're not just some old ranch. John nodded. Good. Let's get ready. He looked out the window at the bulldozers still blocking his driveway. These people have no idea what they've stumbled into. Let's hope they're reasonable once they learn the truth. Outside, Karen Williams was gathering her team, unaware that she wasn't just dealing with a stubborn old rancher but with the first piece of human territory legally classified as not part of Earth, and the people who had made that possible. 3 days had passed since John Mason's meeting with his team. The Bulldozers remained where they were, but the HOA had backed off temporarily after John had shown Greg Patterson some basic legal documents. Those papers hadn't revealed anything classified, just enough to create doubt about the HOA's claims. John stood on his front porch, watching the morning fog lift from the hills. Behind him, Frank Delgado stepped outside. "They're coming back today," Frank said, his voice low. "Our sensors picked up increased activity at their development site last night. Lots of calls and messages between HOA board members." John nodded. "I expected that. Karen Williams isn't the type to give up easily." "We've finished the perimeter preparations," Frank continued. "If needed, we can activate the security systems remotely." These weren't ordinary security measures. The Frontier Initiative facility had been designed to protect vital research even in worst-case scenarios like war or social collapse. The defense systems were carefully hidden, but extremely effective. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," John replied. Inside the house, Dr. Wright and Patricia Holland were preparing for the coming confrontation. They had spent the past days gathering evidence of ownership and rehearsing exactly how much they could reveal without compromising national security. It was nearly noon when the convoy arrived. This time, it wasn't just bulldozers. 6 large trucks led the way, followed by the bulldozers and 3 black SUVs. Men in security uniforms stepped out of the trucks while Karen Williams exited the lead SUV, along with Greg Patterson and a new face, a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Looks like they brought reinforcements," Frank observed from the window. John watched as the men in uniform spread out in what was clearly a practiced formation. "Those aren't regular security guards, they move too well." "Private military contractors," Frank confirmed. "I recognize the patches, Black River Security." Patricia joined them at the window. "They're escalating beyond what I expected. That man in the suit is Richard Bennett, the county commissioner. He's the one who signed off on the land sale." Outside, Karen approached the house with Greg and Richard beside her. The security men remained near the vehicles, but their stance was alert, ready for trouble. John opened the door before they could knock. "Ms. Williams, I see you've brought friends." Karen's smile was cold. "Mr. Mason, this is Commissioner Bennett. He's here to help resolve our little dispute." Richard Bennett stepped forward. "Mr. Mason, I have the final eviction notice here. We've confirmed that your property claim is invalid. The survey records show—" "I know what your records show," John interrupted, "and I've already demonstrated that they're incorrect." Greg Patterson pointed toward the barn about 100 yards from the house. "That structure violates at least 6 building codes and needs to come down immediately. We have authorization to demolish it today." What they didn't know was that the barn housed an atmospheric processor prototype, technology that could one day help humans breathe on Mars. Karen held up a document. "My husband's position on the county board has given us priority development rights. Your refusal to comply is holding up progress for the entire community." Her voice grew louder. "We have legal authority to remove you and these eyesores from our development." 2 of the security men had started walking toward the barn. Frank gave John a questioning look, and John nodded slightly. Frank touched a control on his watch. Immediately, lines of light appeared in the ground, forming a grid pattern that surrounded the entire property. The security men stopped, confused by the sudden appearance of the glowing lines. "What is this?" Richard Bennett asked, stepping back. "This," John said calmly, "is the actual boundary of my property. The lines are just a visual representation of a security system that's been in place for over 20 years. Karen scoffed. "Light shows don't change legal documents, Mr. Mason." John looked directly at Richard Bennett. "Commissioner, before this goes any further, I suggest we talk privately. There are aspects of this situation you're not aware of." Richard hesitated, looking at the security men who were now backing away from the glowing lines, One of them was speaking urgently into a radio. "What kind of security system is this?" Greg demanded. As if in answer, a low hum filled the air. The decorative fence that surrounded John's house, which everyone had assumed was just for show, began to shimmer slightly. "That's classified," John replied simply. Karen took a step forward, her face red with anger. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" She was interrupted by shouts from the security team. The ground beneath the closest bulldozer had started to sink slightly, the earth compacting as hidden mechanisms activated below. "I suggest you move your equipment," Frank called out. "The ground there isn't as stable as it looks." Patricia stepped, outside holding a tablet. "Commissioner Bennett, we've just received authorization from Washington to share certain information with you. Ms. Williams and Mr. Patterson may join us if they sign these." She held up digital non-disclosure agreements. Richard Bennett's expression had changed from confident to worried. "Washington? What exactly is going on here?" "That's what we're prepared to explain," John said. "But only after you call off your security team and move those vehicles." Richard looked at the glowing lines, the shimmering fence, and the bulldozer that was now visibly tilting to one side as the ground continued to shift beneath it. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Pull everyone back," he ordered. "No, just do it now." Karen started to protest, but Richard silenced her with a look. The security men retreated to their vehicles, and the bulldozer operators quickly moved their machines away from the affected area. "Now," Richard said, putting his phone away, "I think you owe us an explanation, Mr. Mason." John nodded toward the house. "Please come inside. What I'm about to show you will make everything clear." As they walked toward the door, Karen whispered angrily to Greg, "This changes nothing. My husband can override whatever game this old man is playing." John pretended not to hear as he led them inside. In the living room, Dr. Wright had set up a holographic display that currently showed a simple map of the area. "Before we begin," Patricia said, holding out the tablets with the non-disclosure agreements, "I need to emphasize that what you're about to learn is classified information. Sharing it with unauthorized persons is a federal offense." Richard signed without hesitation. After a moment of angry glaring, Karen and Greg followed suit. "Thank you," John said. "Now, about my property." He nodded to Dr. Wright, who tapped the controls of the holographic display. The simple map expanded and transformed, revealing the true extent of the facility. A vast complex, mostly underground, spreading far beyond what anyone could see from the surface. Richard Bennett's mouth fell open as he began to understand what they had almost bulldozed into. Richard Bennett stared at the holographic display with wide eyes. The blue light from the hologram reflected on his face as he slowly walked around the table to see it from all angles. The map showed not just John's ranch house and barn, but vast underground levels stretching for miles in all directions. "This is impossible," Karen Williams said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "I assure you it's quite real," Dr. Wright said, adjusting her glasses. "This facility has been here for over 20 years. Greg Patterson pointed to an area on the map where new houses were being built. "But this is where our development is." "Going up? You're saying there's something underneath our houses?" "Auxiliary research chambers," John explained. "Mostly unused now, but still part of the facility." Richard Bennett sank into a chair. "I don't understand. How could something this big exist without appearing in county records?" Patricia Holland stepped forward. "Because this land isn't under county jurisdiction, Commissioner Bennett. It's not even under state or federal jurisdiction in the conventional sense." She pulled up legal documents on the display, replacing the facility map. "The Frontier Initiative was established with international approval. This territory has a special legal status similar to an embassy, but with even greater protections." "What exactly is the Frontier Initiative?" Richard asked. John and his team exchanged looks. Patricia nodded slightly, indicating how much they could share. "Following the climate crisis 20 years ago," John began, "the government recognized we needed radical new approaches to ensure human survival. The Frontier Initiative was created to develop technologies that could help humanity endure worst-case scenarios." Dr. Wright continued, "We research atmospheric modification, sustainable food production, advanced energy systems, and related technologies. What you call my unsightly barn houses a prototype that could one day help humans breathe on Mars. Karen scoffed. Mars? You expect us to believe this ranch is some kind of space research center? In response, Dr. Wright touched another control. The hologram changed to show video footage of the barn's interior, where complex machinery hummed and scientists in lab coats worked at advanced computer stations. Greg's expression shifted from disbelief to awe. This is real? All of this is happening right here? Yes, John said simply. And now you understand why we can't allow bulldozers to start digging up our driveway or demolishing our buildings. Richard Bennett rubbed his forehead. This is a disaster. The county clerk who processed that land sale should never have approved. Those parcels should have been marked as unavailable. Someone made a mistake, Patricia agreed. But now we need to resolve the situation. Karen stood up suddenly. This changes nothing legally. The development has already begun. My husband's position, your husband's position on the county board, is irrelevant, Patricia interrupted. This land isn't under county authority. The legal classification of this territory makes it similar to a sovereign entity. Like a foreign country? Greg asked. Not exactly, Patricia explained, but with similar protections. Any attempt to seize or develop this land without proper authorization would be considered a serious security breach. Karen's face flushed. Red, this is ridiculous. If what you're saying is true, we'll take this to the media. The public has a right to know about secret government facilities in their backyard. That would be unwise, Frank said quietly from his position near the door. Any attempt to expose this facility would be considered a threat to national security. The room fell silent. John looked at the three visitors, seeing the moment when they truly understood the gravity of the situation. Richard Bennett looked pale. Greg Patterson appeared fascinated, and Karen Williams seemed to be calculating her next move. So what happens now? Richard finally asked. John nodded to Patricia, who brought up another display. We propose a compromise. Your development can continue with certain modifications. The HOA will acknowledge the boundaries of our facility and grant permanent easements for access. In return, John continued, we'll provide technical assistance to ensure your construction doesn't interfere with our operations. We can also help improve your infrastructure with some of our more conventional technologies. Greg leaned forward. What kind of technologies? Dr. Wright smiled slightly. Energy systems that would cut your residents' utility bills by 60%, water reclamation that would make your community drought-proof, and communication networks far superior to what's commercially available. Greg's eyes widened. That would make Pinecrest Estates the most desirable development in the region. Karen seemed less impressed. And if we refuse your compromise? Frank stepped forward. Then we activate full security protocols. The legal team in Washington files injunctions against your development, and the matter moves to federal courts, where all the details become classified. Your development stalls for years in legal limbo. Richard Bennett stood up. We accept the compromise. I'll make sure the county records are corrected immediately. Richard, Karen protested. You can't just— Yes, I can, the commissioner said firmly. I've seen enough to know this isn't a battle we can win. He turned to John. Mr. Mason, I apologize for this misunderstanding. We'll work with you to resolve it properly. Karen wasn't ready to surrender. This isn't over. I'll talk to my husband and— John interrupted her gently. Ms. Williams, there's something else you should know. He gestured to Dr. Wright, who changed the display again. The new image showed the underground layout superimposed over the development plans. To everyone's shock, it revealed that the HOA's houses were sitting directly above auxiliary chambers of the research facility. You're not just our neighbors, John explained. Technically, you're building on our property. The legal classification extended underground rights to us for the entire territory. Richard Bennett let out a surprised laugh. So they're basically your tenants? In a manner of speaking, Patricia confirmed. Which is why cooperation is in everyone's best interest. Karen Williams fell silent, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. Greg Patterson, however, seemed to be considering new possibilities. Wait, If we're building above your facility, could there be ways to integrate some of your technology into our homes? That would be a huge selling point. Dr. Wright nodded thoughtfully. With proper security measures, certain non-classified technologies could be adapted for residential use. Richard turned to Karen. This could be an opportunity, not a setback. Imagine marketing Pinecrest Estates as the most advanced community in the country. Karen's expression remained stormy, but John could see her mind working. She was practical, enough to recognize when to change strategies. We would need guarantees, she said finally. Written agreements about boundaries, access, and technology sharing. Of course, Patricia replied. Our legal team can draft those immediately. John looked at the three visitors, then at his team. What had started as a territorial dispute was transforming into something unexpected, a potential model for how the Frontier Initiative might eventually integrate with civilian communities. I suggest we move those bulldozers, John said with a small smile. And then perhaps we can show you more of what we do here. 6 months had passed since the day bulldozers blocked John Mason's driveway. The ranch looked much the same from the outside, the house still modest, the barn still standing where it always had. But beyond the property, everything had changed. John stood on a hill overlooking both his ranch and the Pinecrest Estates development. The houses were complete now, their designs subtly modified to accommodate the hidden technology beneath. Solar panels that were far more efficient than commercial models dotted the rooftops, and small wind turbines that made almost no noise spun lazily in the morning breeze. Frank Delgado walked up the hill to join him. Quite a view, he said, handing John a cup of coffee. Hard to believe this all started with a property dispute. John nodded. Sometimes the best solutions come from the biggest problems. After the revelation about the Frontier Initiative, things had moved quickly. Richard Bennett had become their strongest ally, working with government officials to properly register the facility's boundaries while maintaining its classified status. The legal team had created a unique agreement, part lease, part partnership, that allowed the development to continue while protecting the research facility. The new residents are moving in today, Frank noted. 20 families in the first phase. All of them vetted and signed the agreements? John asked. Everyone, Frank confirmed. Patricia made sure of it. Limited disclosure, maximum security. The compromise had evolved into something no one expected. Rather than fighting the development, the Frontier Initiative had carefully integrated the community into its outer operations. The residents of Pinecrest Estates knew they were living above something special, though most didn't know the full extent of what happened beneath their homes. Dr. Wright wants you in the main lab by noon, Frank said. The atmospheric processor is ready for the next phase of testing. I'll be there, John promised. Down in the development, a now familiar figure was directing landscapers as they planted trees along the main entrance. Karen Williams had surprised everyone with her adaptation to the new reality. Once she accepted that fighting was pointless, she had redirected her organizational skills toward more productive ends. John watched as she inspected each tree placement with the same attention to detail she once applied to HOA violations. As part of the agreement, she had maintained her position as president of the Homeowners Association, but with a very different mission. The HOA now served as the community face of the Frontier Initiative, maintaining the cover story of a normal development while providing structure for what had become a small, semi-autonomous research colony. A black government car pulled up. Near John's position, a woman in a dark suit stepped out and walked up the hill. Director Mason, she greeted him formally. Since the incident, John's role had been officially recognized again, no longer the retirement cover story it had been for years. Agent Lawson, John nodded. How was Washington? Impressed, she replied. The Oversight Committee has reviewed the integration model. They want to expand it to other research sites. It's working better than we expected, John admitted. The residents bring skills we didn't have before. What had begun as a compromise had revealed an unexpected truth. Civilian specialists could contribute greatly to the research mission when properly included. Greg Patterson, who had once threatened to demolish the atmospheric processor barn, now helped maintain its support systems. His engineering background had proven valuable once he received proper clearance. "The first community gathering is tonight," Frank said. "The residents are excited to meet the ranch staff they've heard so much about." John smiled at the term. Ranch staff was the cover identity for the research scientists and security personnel who worked at the facility. To the outside world, they were just employees of an eccentric rancher who owned a lot of land. "Will Karen behave herself, Agent?" Lawson asked with a raised eyebrow. "Surprisingly, yes," John replied. "She's found her place in all this. Turns out her management skills are exactly what we needed for community resources." They began walking back toward the ranch house. In the distance, John could see Dr. Wright walking between buildings, tablet in hand, likely monitoring the atmospheric processor's preparations. "It's strange," John said after a moment. 6 months ago, I was ready to activate every security system we had to keep these people away. Now they're part of the project. Life is full of unexpected turns," Agent Lawson replied. "That's what the Frontier Initiative is all about, adapting to survive." They reached the house just as Patricia Holland was coming out the door. "John, the new communication system is online. The residents can now access the community network." This was another innovation born from the compromise. A secure network allowed limited information sharing between the facility and the homes above, giving residents access to some of the advanced technologies while maintaining security protocols. "Any problems with the setup?" John asked. "None," Patricia smiled. "In fact, 2 of the new residents are network specialists. They've already suggested improvements to the firewall design." Inside the house, the once simple living room had been transformed. What visitors saw was still a modest ranch house, but hidden panels now concealed advanced technology. The holographic display had been upgraded, and communication stations linked the house to every part of the facility. "Director," Dr. Wright called from another room. "The atmospheric processor is ready for demonstration. The Washington team wants to observe the test." John checked his watch. "Right on schedule." As he headed toward the hidden elevator that would take him to the main lab levels, he paused to look out the window. A moving truck was entering the development, bringing another family to their new home. Children played in yards that 6 months ago had been empty fields. In the community center, carefully built to avoid the sensitive areas below, residents were gathering for their first official meeting. "You know," Frank said, joining him at the window, "this might actually be the real purpose of the Frontier Initiative." "What do you mean?" John asked. "We've been developing technology to help humanity survive on other worlds someday," Frank explained. "But this," he gestured toward the thriving community, "this is the social model we'd need. Technology alone won't save us. We need to figure out how different kinds of people can live and work together in enclosed, resource-limited environments." John considered this. "You might be right. When we eventually build those first Mars habitats, they'll need to function as communities, not just research stations." "Exactly," Dr. Wright said as she entered the room. "What started as an annoying property dispute might have accidentally created the template for humanity's future among the stars." The irony wasn't lost on John. 8 bulldozers blocking his driveway had led to a breakthrough no one had anticipated. As he prepared to descend to the lab where the technology for breathing on Mars was being perfected, he glanced once more at the development. Karen Williams was standing at its center, pointing confidently toward the future site of a community garden, one that would test soil enrichment techniques designed for the harsh Martian surface. She had no idea that her HOA leadership skills were helping prepare humanity for the stars. Some problems, John reflected, create their own perfect solutions.